And just some initial comments before we come to the opening karakia. Please be aware this meeting has been live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Members, could you please remember to speak clearly into your microphones and only one speaker at a time for clarity, and can either turn off your phones or make sure they're on silent. Yes. Kia ora, I understand you. Whiti volunteered you as opening karakia.
Kia ora tātou. Tika ana ngā mea katoa. Tuku atu ngā whakawhiti ana whakamōmiti te ringa nipo. I honore e kōria ki te atua i maunga aronga ki me te whenua e whakaaro pai ki ngā takatakato. E te atua matua ka rawa. Me ngā pononga tūnga tēnei ki a koe. E te mai koe e awhina e arata ki a mātou. Me ngā iwo tō māranatara ki ngā tāru atu ai ki a koe. Ko te inoi o te ariki. E te ariki I tōngia rā mātou. E ukaraiti I tōngia rā mātou. I tō mātou matunu I te rangi ki a tapo atu ringoa. Kia tau mai tau rangatiratanga kia me te tau e pai ai ki mai te whenua. Kia rite anō ki tō te ringoa. Mai kia mātou ai anei he toro mō mātou mō tēnei rā. E mō mātou hara me mātou ki nei muru nei ngā hara. O te hunga harana ki a mātou. Au hoki mātou e kaua ki a whakawaia, engari whakaorangi a mātou I te ki. Nō hoki I te rangatiratanga, te kaha, o te kororia, aere, ākia, maru. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. Before I go any further, I'd just like to welcome Spencer to the committee. Spencer has been appointed as alternate, and those changes were requested by Politiki, and the council formally noted those changes on Monday at our council meeting. So Spencer is replacing Rangi. So although you are here to participate presumably in the discussion on the business case, so I'd just like to acknowledge your contribution as being an alternate on the business. So I mentioned to Spencer before the meeting, more than happy for coming to contribute to the meeting in terms of comments, questions, etc. Given Lara is here as the primary representative, Spence is unable to vote, but certainly full participation other than that in the meeting. Okay. Lara. Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry. My apologies, Spencer. Okay. Microphones. Okay, well, that's clear. I wonder why I was getting some strange looks around the table. So, in terms of then apologies, everyone who's meant to be here is here, although there's an apology from Stephen for departure around about 3:15 or thereabouts. So, if I can have a move, I'm happy to move that. Seconded. Thanks, Des. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And there is no public forum. There are no late items. And there's no confidential business to be transferred into the open. There's no change in the order of business. So if we come to item 7, which was the minutes of our last formal meeting, which was some time ago on the 31st of August. Someone who was at that meeting to move and second those.
Waitering your move.
I'm happy to second those because some of the other people around the table weren't at the meeting. So I've been moved by Whitty. I've seconded those. Are there any matters in terms of clarification on the accuracy of those minutes? There are not. Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we'll come to the next item, declaration of conflicts of interests. Are there any such declarations? Okay, there are not. So we'll go to item 9, 9.1, which is the Wastewater Program business case. Just before I go to you, Nick, Jane, Lara, was there any comment you wanted to make at this point? Okay. Okay, no, that's fine. So 9.1, and that item commences on page 20. Nick.
Thank you, Bill. I'll hand over to Jane to run through the highlights, the headlines of the business case. Over to you, Jane.
And just before you do that, Jane, and that's the highlights, because there's been a whole lot of work that a lot of people around this table have already been involved with, probably apart from Stephen and I. But I'd also like to get some understanding in terms of what the process looks like going forward once we get to a stage of then making some endorsement decisions on what's before us. And I'm not saying that that's happening today, but I just wanted to get a feel for that process so everyone around the table has that clear understanding.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. I just want to draw your attention to Nicola Holding on the screen. Nicola is currently in Wellington, but as most people know in this room, she has been leading us through the program business case, so can answer any sort of process related questions that there may be in terms of how information may be used, etc. But just very briefly, as a project team, we have been working for some time on the program business case. We had Marty Duncan for some time as part of the project team from Naupotiki, and then subsequently Lara and Te Rangi Mario have been brought in, which is fantastic. Yeah, as I set out in the report, the program business case will define a preferred way forward for future investment in the wastewater scheme. So when we talk about the wastewater scheme, we are looking at investment in the plants, and we are looking at the network as a whole. I guess the initial focus for us really was on the marine outfall and what the future plans were for the marine outfall. The scope of what we were doing was fairly narrow, but it quickly became apparent that we needed to broaden our thinking, given that the network, the plants and the outfall are all joined and are related. So in that way, the work was broadened to look at the program business case. So as a project team, what we have been doing is defining what we perceive as to be the key issues relating to the wastewater scheme, and those are set out in attachment 1 at the back. The development of investment objectives for any investment into that scheme, and also service requirements. What are we hoping to achieve by this investment? When we are looking at responses that we may look to implement. We're looking at sort of a broad range. We're looking at infrastructure responses and also non-infrastructure. So we are considering educational initiatives, policy, the whole spectrum of things. As we are moving towards, through the water reform's potential transition to an entity, we're looking at how that wastewater scheme might service a broader region and not just Tauranga City. So we have been looking into the Western Bay as well, and looking to see how areas that, where consenting may be a little compromised, or how those areas could be serviced as well as part of a broader scheme. Happy to take further questions on that at this point. I guess what we are asking the committee at this point is to look as a whole at the work that we have done thus far. We're checking that you have a level of comfort with that. We want, aside from the 4 matters that we will be discussing further, we're just wanting that you have a level of comfort with that to enable us to move on to subsequent stages of the program business case. Basically, in doing that, we're sort of embedding and locking in those foundational aspects of the program business case so that we can look and start looking at what potential responses we could target to meet those, will get the benefit and meet those investment objectives. The next stage of the process would then be doing some assessments to get down to a short list. But before we do that, we just want to check that you all have a level of comfort as to the work that we've done so far.
Just in terms of that subsequent process, and certainly noting on page 21, outlining some subsequent stages, then at what point does the business case come to the council for approval, sign off, or whatever? Just wanted a bit of a sense of that timing.
I might look to Nick a little bit, but I would say we would be coming back to the committee as a whole anyway at each of the next meetings, just giving you an update on where we're at. But I would have thought maybe at the shortlist stage we could come back and check in. But there will be a bit of work that we need to do between the long list and shortlisting. There are further studies that we have identified that we will need that will help us through that assessment process. So, I would say probably at the shortlist stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there will be an end point at some stage. What's the feeling in terms of when that end point occurs? I'm just trying to get a feel for how far out.
I might put that one over to Nick. Can you hear us, Nick?
Sure. I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, good question. So we'll first of all be able to give you a more definitive answer on that once we've got to the next step, but essentially we're looking at early next year to have a draft. And the reason for that is there'll be a bit of a gap between the point that we have all of our long list options identified and the studies and investigations that need to take place to inform an assessment. And until we know what options we're actually looking at, getting a program for that next, analysis phase is a little tricky. So I've put in the notes, I think we'll kind of re-baseline that program after those next workshops around long list option identification. But all going smoothly, early next year for a draft. Just noting that it's an entirely workshop-based process, which means, we're very much relying on everyone being able to come aboard, really.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Right.
Any other staff comments at this stage? Wally?
If I may.
Yes.
I think from a staff perspective, we've found, that the level of engagement's been really, really encouraging. We've learned a lot out of this process around expectations, and this is a real new way of working. I'm not aware of any other council going into this level of detail this early in a process, so that all the parties are together and have a joint understanding of matters and issues. There's a high level of agreement on all of the matters through there, except for a couple of hard ones that we've come to today, and that's why they're coming up. But there's been an incredible amount of work and effort gone into by everybody in that working group to get to this point. And yeah, I know you've acknowledged that work, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. But it's been, from a staff perspective, we've learned a heck of a lot out of this exercise as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up for questions or comments, and I've got some suggestions for a bit later on, but I'll open it up to people in terms of any clarifications or questions that members may have. Stephen.
Well, if I may, at a high level, so the decision-making process around the business case, obviously working through this committee, which is a recommendatory committee. So at some stage, this will be referred for a decision to the Commission. And are you saying that would be at the short list stage and early next year? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes,
Yep.
yes, that's correct, yeah.
And the function of the Commission at that stage would be to approve the short list or a preferred option.
It would be, yeah, approving the shortlist, and yeah, Nick, the roadmap that we will come up with, it comprises a shortlist of the way forward, basically, and yeah, and so the council would be providing their approval of that shortlist. Is that?
That's spot on. So your shortlist, once approved through your decision making through the Commission, we then take that shortlist and we turn it into a roadmap. And the roadmap essentially has your first cab off the rank in terms of a suite of projects, first tranche of projects, more detail on those up front, and then the latter tranches have a little bit less detail, which you'd expect over a long time frame. But we wouldn't be starting on the roadmap process until we had confirmation about which shortlist options to take forward.
So, Gio, I'm just trying to get an understanding of the timeline in terms of how long the Commission is here when a final decision on the business case, third option, might be taken. The timeline is for that, is this going to be a decision of the timeline of the Commission or the longer?
Given we depart in July next year. So
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so to a certain extent, as Nick discussed, that depends on what those assessment projects look like and how long they might take. But the idea would be that we would have something prior to that.
Yeah, that's right. We would certainly be looking for endorsement of that shortlist, and then, as Nick said, we would go on to develop that into the roadmap, sort of high priority responses and actions first, which we would focus on.
Which could well carry on with a new council, I suspect.
Correct.
Given the,
But we would want to lock in
the direction.
with direction prior to that, yes.
Yeah, some of the stuff that we're working on is quite transformational, because we're looking at the whole of system. It's not just the treatment plant or treatment plants, it's networks. So it's looking into levels of service around wastewater overflows, the amount of even the amount of water that's used in houses and things. So we're setting some quite bold targets across the entire water spectrum, if you like, for the city, and how they impact on the wastewater network. So this is quite a transformational piece of work, and it's, yeah, as I say, it's so different having this level of engagement so far early in the pipeline of effort going in. So normally this is just a piece of work that's done by staff. So we've taken a completely different approach this time and trying to work collaboratively with our key partners to make sure that we do get the best outcomes for the whole community.
Thank you. Steve,
If I may, oh, sorry. I was just going to, if I may help with that too, just in terms of time frame, I would be very hopeful that we'd have the shortlist confirmed before Christmas. We've front-footed some of the studies in terms of identifying kind of already. And I think the drafting is something that would take place in the new year of the business case. So we should be well clear. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Steve.
Thank you, that's helpful. And then, so I'm just trying to get timeframes. And then we think about formation and inception of entity, whatever it is, does it still be? Then there, what obligations do we have in that regard? I mean, I understand it's pretty much business as usual, but these will be strategic decisions that we'll be committing by the council prior to the formation of that entity. So is there an involvement or participatory process by the entity at some stage?
Yeah, so under the new Act, we have an obligation to report back on decisions that will impact future operation of any water services. So this will definitely be one of them. So I think when we get to a decision on the business case, we will have to report back to the DIA, and I would have thought also that as we get to the shortlisting stage, that an equal sort of reporting obligation would apply. Yeah.
That's helpful to know. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Sorry for the line.
No, that's all right. Okay, any other? Oh, sorry, Zara. Yep.
Just while we're on process, because it follows on from this, I'm curious around the process for decision making within the project team of the program business case itself. Because obviously the council members of the PBC project team are bringing to this committee for direction things that haven't been able to be agreed amongst all members, particularly the tangata whenua members of the program business case project team. How do we get to that, what's the process of the project business case project team to resolve any differences yourself, essentially?
You're quite correct. We've been looking for consensus on everything, and there's just a couple of items that we have been unable to get consensus around the wording. And I think the right intent is there. It's just some of the definitions around some of the words that need clarification, and we haven't been able to get clarification on some of those words. So it's really just some of the detail around the drafting of those matters that we are still a little bit apart on. And it may be that clarity is not available at this point in time. I don't know, but certainly we would like to do some further work on the drafting.
So, sorry, Mark. No. So just teasing that line out a bit further. And this is a question for all of the project team members around the table. What further assistance or input would be appropriate? And I'm thinking whether it's some legal advice input or some other type of input for then the project team to consider, given the 4 issues that we have before us. If we pause today, provided some further time for the project team, and then the project team to come back after that period with that additional input, whatever that looks like, in terms of working through and resolving those 4 matters. And I'm sort of picking up on your commentary, Wally, in terms of the wording. There does seem to be some mixing of what, in terms of the business case, vis-a-vis RMA provisions and wording and obligations. So I'm just posing that question in terms of what may be required. And the intent of that was probably putting the issues back to the project team for another look at, with some other input as appropriate, and then coming back to us. So just wanted to put that on the table as a starter for 10.
Yeah, but there are a couple of options, aren't there? Like, I mean, one could potentially be that we develop a terms of reference that includes a decision-making process around a mandate where you don't reach a consensus. That could be one option. And another option is that we keep going as a project team. Essentially, we te marama, I think it's called. Basically, where you work way through all the options and try to reach a consensus by drawing on everyone's knowledge and input and experience and reach that consensus. But I guess that was the point of putting those 4 issues to the table here today, and that we hadn't been able to reach consensus on those, and we're hoping for maybe that the marama to be had here. To be able to reach some consensus around it at this table, but if that's not possible, maybe terms of reference or some kind of a framework around how those decisions could be made would be helpful.
And certainly, in terms of having a discussion today and teasing out some of those matters, but all I was suggesting is that we do that. Is there some other assistance or input required to clarify some of those matters? For an example, when you look at the word avoid, and that has some particular meanings under the RMA, which may be different in terms of what's intended, in terms of what we're talking about today, in terms of the business case. So there was some things like that, whether that type of input and clarification would assist for the project team to then go away, have some of that input, work those matters through, and then come back. I suppose what I was trying to narrow down, potentially, if we could reach agreement on the 4, in terms of the we being the project team, or ultimately if it can't, certainly what's narrowed down. And again, while I'm coming, you mentioned about the wording, and a lot can turn on the words. And that's why whether that input in terms of some legal advice or other input would assist. Happy for others to comment. I just wanted to put the suggestion on the table. Yes.
Yeah, just clarification on where we're at. Thank you. Is that are you asking us to sort it out? Now,
well, not so much. Well, fine, we'll have a discussion today, but one of the opportunities is to pause after today's discussion, and then for the project team to go away, whether there's some further legal advice or input or some other input, all that goes in for discussion in the Muley, and then the project team to come back. So I wasn't saying that. I think it might be probably a big ask to sort out, and particularly in terms of the comment of trying to achieve consensus on those 4 matters today.
That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments?
So,
Stephen, just before Stephen's comments, what I'm suggesting and trying to do, it would be good to get in the space, picking up the previous comments, that we have agreement on all matters from the project team as advice to the review committee. So this is probably just adding a further step in terms of trying to achieve that. Stephen.
Yeah, well, I think to a certain extent we need to get a steer from the members of the committee as to whether or not they see there is a pathway forward. To me, there are some challenges around words like avoid because of the RMA statutory definition now determining what that means. It basically means you can't. And you know, that would be a very large commitment in the business case, which would have significant implications. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if we want to do everything we can to reduce, which is the current plan. So whether or not, you know, kind of there's room to move on that wording, I don't know, and that's really for the committee to have a conversation around. And the other matters around must not disturb the Rapa or Waihe Tapu sites. What does that mean? I'm not clear. Presumably that means potentially going under. Is that possible? Or going round? Is that possible? And then what are the implications of that? And then I note the staff discussion around the wide application and of Hapua and iwi management plans and the number and dating of those could be quite significant in terms of the workload. Whereas perhaps consideration of those matters at a more strategic level might still achieve the same outcome, but not necessarily be so cumbersome a process. So to me, I think there may be some ways around that, but I think understanding the views of Manu and Tangata Whenua as to whether or not they are open to looking at those. I haven't heard that conversation, so it'd be good to kind of hear it today. My view currently as it stands is that we probably can't see a way past. And if that's the case, then you know we probably are at a decision point. But if we're not, if there's an opportunity to maybe have a conversation around some of those matters and have them resolved at the committee, then I think that would be a better outcome if we could achieve that. So support your direction, Chair, if that could be achieved. And what I'd like to get is a sense from the other members as to whether or not they think there's a way forward.
Lara.
Thank you. And I'm still on the process topic, I guess. I think and I think when you were saying committee, you were actually meaning the project team,
I was.
not us. Right, okay. So in bringing this issue to our committee, what we've had is the council perspective on it, and we haven't had the Tangata Whenua member perspective on it, which for me just raises a process concern around how these issues have come to us, because as is clear from your comments, you've started to form a view around the issues and their resolvability based on the council perspective, and we haven't yet had the Tangata Whenua perspective. So I just want to understand and really confirm that this is the council members' report to the committee, and that the Tangata Whenua members haven't had any input into it. Okay. Yeah. And they haven't obviously had an opportunity to provide a separate report for the committee to consider. So at the moment, this is council staff members' perspective or position on those issues, and why there might be an inability to reach agreement. But we really haven't, as committee members, we haven't been told what the Tangata Whenua perspective is to then judge whether or not the project team, there might be room to resolve these issues themselves without our committee needing to make a decision on it. So I think we should receive that information. I'm concerned that we're receiving it in this meeting today without the tangata whenua members having been given a chance, like the council staff have had, to put a report together that we've all been able to reflect upon for the last week. So if we are to open up a discussion on the substance of some of these outstanding issues, the caveat for me is the tangata whenua members, if they speak today, should still be afforded a similar opportunity to provide a written document that might better and more fully articulate our position than just being essentially put on the spot to do it today.
As Chair, I have no problem at all in terms of that discussion today with that particular caveat and providing that opportunity for a subsequent time. So, but in picking up, I think Stephen's point, it would be good though to have some of the discussion around some of those matters, and then that will help inform everyone. It might help inform then the project team in terms of its further consideration of matters. But no issue with the caveat. Did you have?
Oh, well, just to say, I've looked at the council report, and just to pick up on that one example, and we've all touched upon it, well, us three have all touched upon it, this use of this language, avoid or seek to avoid, and what it may or may not mean in an RMA context. I have a very clear view on that, which is, unless it's in a regional plan, doesn't mean anything. So, and it's not in a regional plan, as far as I'm aware. It sits in your program business case, one of your indicators or criteria, but it's being treated like it's in an RMA document. And seek to avoid, to my understanding, is different from avoid, and there's already examples out there in national policy statements that provide policies that say seek to avoid as opposed to avoid, and guidance, MFE guidance, that says that has a different meaning from avoid and gives transparent. The example I'm using is the MPS electricity transmission. When you use the phrasing seek to avoid, that does give flexibility. So if council staff or the council members, to my mind, don't need to be as concerned around that language as they appear to be, will that sort of change the mood a little bit in terms of being open to that kind of terminology, rather than sort of being quite resistant to it because you believe it's going to have this implication that I'm not sure it will have. But again, it's not for me as a member of the committee to be giving that advice, although I just did so freely.
Accepted, Laura.
That might be something on which the project teams get some advice, so there's a level of comfort around this language, its context, and how it might be used. Because I appreciate your concern if it were to have that effect, but what if it didn't have that effect? Would you feel differently about its use? And that's the sort of discussion I'd like the project team to go back and have, making sure it hasn't misdirected itself in terms of what some of the implications might be.
And following on from your comments, Lara, I suppose that's what I was sort of generally alluding to in terms of what other inputs are required, suggesting that whether it's legal advice or anything else to actually clarify some of these issues, and are they real or are they matters that can actually be worked through and agreed?
Yeah, and I just gave a specific example.
Other commentary. But I think picking up Stephen, it would be good to have some further comment from the project team members who happen to be committee members. just on, is there, subject to what we've already talked about, that opportunity in terms of tangata whenua, written statements and matters like that, potentially taking a pause today, providing that further opportunity for the project team. So, Whitty.
Kia ora. All I can say to that is if I disagree with Mara, I would have said or have spoken up. So I don't know what she's just expressed there, you know, because I still couldn't get my head around, you know, of a seek to avoid instead of just, you know, just focusing on one word, avoid, but the seek to avoid, you know, that changes a whole lot, you know, the whole context. As you know, as we all know, one or two words, even that or it, can change a whole sentence and the meaning of it. So, yeah, don't know what Lara was saying.
Okay, thanks, Whitty. Cheers.
Kia ora. Like Lara, I'll be giving cultural information and advice from a specialist nature. And I don't have to go on any further. That has been said. And the pressure to kind of resolve something, which I feel is a communication project level matter. I believe that is the better option.
Which is, if I take it from that, there's, in terms of the matter, the project team having further discussions, input, and then coming back.
Corridor communication.
Yep. Okay. No. Okay.
Sounds like we need a motion to refer it back to the project committee, don't we?
If I can come to that in a minute. I was just going to see if there was any further commentary or input from staff before we get to it. Any further feel, and this is again to the project, any further direction from us at this point in time, or whether you've picked up enough from the discussion today and the statements for the team to go away and do that further work and seek that input from whoever you feel is needed to do that. Jane, were you going to comment?
Yeah, no, I think it would be very helpful actually to have some written feedback from you and the team. Yeah, so I mean, as we say here, some of the issues are around seeking clarification. What did you mean by this? What was the intent behind that? So I think anything to help that out would be great.
Okay. Okay. So Stephen, back to you.
Chair, I would move that we refer all matters back to the project team with the request that views of tangata whenua are expressed in writing, so that there's something of substance that can be responded to. And then obviously there would need to be a subsequent meeting to discuss those through, and that we convene another meeting in June to consider the matter again. Hopefully, with a clear recommendation from the team.
Two fingers.
I think both Jan and I just wanted a clarification, maybe in the resolution, that it is we don't seek feedback in writing on all of the issues, but actually it's only necessary for the 4 that are outstanding. I would happy either way, but a matter of.
No, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
that's presumptive. I think we should allow the tangata whenua members to provide their feedback on any other of the matters that presume council staff's view is that there are no issues. We need to make sure that's confirmed.
No, that's a good clarification. Yeah, so it's not to everything by default, but to everything where tangata whenua feels that there is a need to clarify that view. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, kia ora to that point. That's why I wanted to reserve that process to my other hat with regards to the project steering groups and or project business case, rather than bring that information out here, because we all need to look at it from that level. And that I have made some notes based on today to actually help as a guideline anyway when we re-engage on this at the committee level.
Project team.
Yeah. Thank you. Kia ora.
I've just asked Hera to put it on the screen.
Sorry, can I just seek one
Yes,
point of
you may.
clarification? So we're just to confirm that we aren't endorsing attachment 1 as it stands.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just waiting on the technology. And I'm happy to second Stephen's motion. Oh, you already had it there, didn't you? Yes.
Is it refer the report back then?
Yeah.
Is this to consider the feedback?
Well, I had three sort of steps. The views of tangata whenua to be expressed in writing, and that'll be on the format as in anything else that should be dealt with now. Then second, a subsequent meeting of the project team, once you've considered that response, to try and see if anything can be resolved that isn't presently resolved. And then thirdly, a reconvened committee meeting to get the update from the project team. June might be optimistic, but for those three steps, but there's motivation, I'm sure, within the project team to try and deal with your 2 steps as quickly as possible.
And if we left June there, if there was an issue, that's okay. Come back to Lara and I as chair and deputy chair, and then we can consider that.
It's a full report, you want?
Yeah, full report on all of the, not just the full one.
Yeah, but the report is received.
As you see.
I've already gone beyond the 4 years.
So,
And the intent in terms of the project team seeking whatever advice or input, we take that as read. that occurs. The second one, there'd be a
subsequent meeting.
project team after receipt of the of the project team after receipt of the written views of tangata whenua. Just trying to be as clear as. Okay. So there's three parts to it there. Members happy with what's proposed? Stephen, as mover, are you happy with the subsequent amendments?
Yeah, I mean, I
Clarification?
was wondering whether in the second item we should add some words with a view to resolving the outstanding matters or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, yes, provide some direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether it's the receipt of the written views from tangata whenua,
Yeah.
with a view to resolving the outstanding matters.
Or the objective, or yeah.
Take out. Yeah.
And it should be subsequent.
No.
Just one thing to add to that line then, if there's an external advisor or a facilitator or whatever that person is endorsed by unanimously by the project team. Or is that overcomplicating it maybe? I just thought before we go into that, it's probably better to have clarity on who the people are on the board.
Nicola was.
So the suggestion from the chair earlier on was that there might be some, in order to have different input to reach a different conclusion, other than the matters being responded to by tangata whenua, that there might be a need to have someone different in the room to facilitate or provide advice. That was the.
I was probably more. I wasn't reflecting on the current arrangements. I was more suggesting if there was legal advice needed or something of that ilk, that is provided, and there's a discussion with the project team with, say, a legal advisor as part of the discussion. I wasn't reflecting on the current arrangements at all.
Right, I think we're happy to leave the resolution as it stands then. Thank you.
And I think the other thing, if there are some matters that arise, in the first instance, Lara and I here as chair and deputy. So if there was any further guidance required after the meeting. Okay, last opportunity. I'm taking it that members are happy with what's on the board there, on the screen. Okay. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Okay.
Thanks, people. Thanks, team. And we'll go to the next item on the agenda. And that's the Wastewater Management Review Activity Report.
Turn it on. The presentation that needs loading.
Bradley, so you're just going to do a quick.
Yeah, sorry, just in
Intro
case,
and all
just
that.
in case not everyone knows who Jim is. So Jim is currently doing the environmental program lead role in the drainage team. So his team involves not only the pollution team and consents, but also facilitating the review committee. So he's jumped into that role, and he has been putting together a little summary on all the sort of work streams and projects that are currently underway in the wastewater scheme system.
Welcome, Jim.
Will you just
No. We'll just adjourn for a few minutes while we're getting the technology sorted. Yeah. Please chat amongst yourselves.
Deja vu. Deja vu from
Yesterday. I followed up on that.
Yeah.
For an hour and a half. Yes, I think she was looking at next week. I think I made the offer that probably be able to do teams.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll reconvene. Welcome, Jim, and you'll take us through the update presentation.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Summers. It's my first time presenting at the Wastewater Management Review Committee, but I've been helping out for a year or so, helping Radley out. So what I'll do today is I'll just run you through the wastewater activities report. So it's in the document in front of you. I've just got a presentation together with some extra pictures on there just to help build a picture of what we've been doing. So let's jump into it. So we'll start off with the outfall discharge consent. So since the August meeting last year, all the sampling is within the consent limits. We happened to go into some upgrades of the language section, and there's not been any discharges for a few dates, which I've documented in the activities report. Next slide, please. So moving on to the consent monitoring. So we've got the seepage consent, and we know the seepage is coming out of the ponds. As you can see on the right, we've had the desludging campaign starting in August last year, and the seepages are well within the consent limits with the dredging programme underway. In regards to other consent monitoring, we've had no odour complaints for both Chapel Street and Tumanga wastewater treatment plants. Just another point, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to interrupt me. Next slide, please. So we've got two emergency discharge consents for both Chapel Street and Tumanga. So in 2023, we've experienced quite a bit of heavy rainfall, which I've just pulled out on the right. So you can see we've experienced some pretty heavy rainfall in March of this year. This pushed the Chapel Street plant to capacity and resulted in a discharge, which was unfortunately not treated, not UV treated due to a software failure. Since then, we've rectified the issue when the UV plant is fully operational. Next slide, please. The second event of this year was in May 2023. So again, you can see with the graph on the right, we've experienced very heavy localised rainfall. This caused the Chapel Street plant's ability to send the discharge to Timanga to overtop, and we had a discharge that approximately lasted for 90 minutes. During the discharge, the UB plant was fully operational. And in terms of the emergency discharge consent for Timanga, we've not had any recorded. Yeah, just to clarify, it's fully treated effluent, it's not plastic. Important to know.
That's not the question for me.
Next slide, please. Moving on to the wastewater overflows. So since August until May 2023, in total we've had 112 wastewater blockages. Sorry, I'm just reading off the slide here. Yeah, 81 didn't leave the network and they were contained to land. 12 of them were contained within the stormwater network, 4 were contained on land, and 19 overflows made it to the receiving environment. And as per our overflow protocol, the Regional Council, Taitiara, and local iwi, Hapu and RMA reps were notified, and subsequent sampling was undertaken. Once the sampling shows it's not affected by the overflow, then we'll remove the signage and do what everything else that we're required to do. Next slide, please.
Just in terms of the blockages, Jim, what was the main cause of the 112?
Very far and varied. Very varied, I mean. Fats and the wipes are quite predominant in terms of blockages. So where we have those, we look at catchment and we work with our waterline team to try and pinpoint where the overflow blockage happened. If it was to do with fats and wipes, and we'll do a lecture drop there and leaflet drops and just raise awareness. It can happen due to cracks in the network, such as slumping or dips, third-party damage, some of the factor, and that's where we'll just go in and repair it. Moving on to the infiltration strategy. So I'm not sure if you're aware, I think you've been told before, but this is when stormwater and groundwater enters the wastewater network, and when this occurs, it can create a number of issues for the wastewater network. Main one is it can reduce the capacity there. It can cause overflows. Our TCC engineer was due to give a presentation on this after myself, but unfortunately he's been taken sick, so we have to table that till next time. Yes. Yeah.
Great.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that. So I guess the I&I strategy and the work that comes out of that has a direct input on things like the Chapel Street issues that we've seen over the last couple of months with having to discharge into the harbour. The amount of stormwater that we get in the wastewater network means that the flow coming to the likes of Chapel Street increases excessively in those sort of peak flows, and that's why we end up having more coming into the plant than we can put out. So where Timanga is slightly different is we have the ability at the moment to balance those flows with the pond 1 and the pond 1, pond 2 and the wetlands. So that allows us to try and reduce the impact of having to discharge to the harbour. So that's why the I&I strategy is quite an important piece of work, because it will actually hopefully take some of the pressure off in those peak events.
Yes.
Just with the groundwater and stormwater entering, is there any information gathered around I suppose the stormwater and groundwater available in those catchment systems, so they can be managed either at its source or where they are intersecting with the wastewater network?
I'm not sure fully get, but so we've done quite a bit of work on the Wastewater network itself, and in terms of how what they call tight a system it is. So I'm going to steal Brian's thunder here now, but yeah. So we've done quite a bit of modelling within the network. The planning team over the last couple of years have used Howard, who is a modelling company, to look at the network, see where we might have some capacity issues when we get these peak flows, and generally how tight the network is around the city. We're quite fortunate that we do have quite a tight network. So although we're seeing some capacity issues at Chapel Street when we get these peak events, we're actually in a fairly good space in terms of the network, and that's what part of the I&I strategy is to try and improve where we can, but also to enable us to maintain that tight network as we move forward and we grow, and that we don't end up having going, I would say going backwards, but trying to maintain that level of tightness that we have, so that when we do start introducing projects that look at the capacity issues that the modelling is showing us, we're having that positive influence on the issues, rather than trying to play catch up all the time. So in terms of where capacity might be an issue, yes, we've done some work, and where the inputs from stormwater and groundwater are coming from, there's some work there that we're looking to use to identify where we need to upgrade or improve capacity. But in terms of the level of stormwater or groundwater, we probably haven't got to that point yet. There's some work that we do monitor a lot of groundwater across the city, and I think, as everyone probably appreciates at the moment, the groundwater table is certainly higher than it has been over the last few years. And a lot of the city, a lot of the country's completely saturated at the moment. So I guess we're probably seeing more issues than we have over those few years that we had, where we had more of a drought. We're seeing more groundwater into the networks, both stormwater and wastewater.
That's good, thank you, Redley, because I was thinking that a lot of the network, and I've seen it and have reviewed it and assessed it, like for the Malini catchment, it's kind of engineered. If the storage capacity cannot cope, it will find its way into a controlled area of groundwater / a drain, which was essentially the Mahinga Kai area, which is another area of discussion. Are there further areas like that, for instance, around attenuating that type of water that might be involved in the I&I for the particular instances around Chapel Street, that instead of all building and flowing out into the harbour, are there kind of like natural areas also being identified in your study where that discharge may occur? Because we'd like to know as Tanga Defender, because they potentially could be mana te wai issues around Mahinga Kai. Thank you.
Yeah, so the modelling has identified where we might be having capacity issues because of the inflow, but it's the I&I strategy that will allow us to find out potentially where the actual inputs are coming from. At this stage, we can gather some information from pump stations and the modelling as to what areas of the city might be creating the most problems, but then we need to try and narrow down as to what the specific problems are in terms of finding areas where we're potentially attenuate, and that's part of the modelling work that's happening at the moment, is to see where are the areas that we're seeing those capacity issues, and then how do we try and resolve those without just pushing it further down the network or pushing it somewhere else and having the same issues. So that's the piece of work that sort of is happening at the moment, based off the modelling and what will come out with the I&I strategy is more about how we can actually fix some of the sources of it.
So, thank you.
So yeah, just to clarify, our engineer will provide a presentation on that next time. Next slide, please. So moving on to the Timanga upgrades. So we're continuing with the desludging of Pond 1, which began in September of last year. So far today, we've got 2,700 dry tonnes of sludge that's removed from Pond 1. So on the photo on the right, there's a photo of the sludge cell with Pond 1 in the background. So that trench is where we're putting depositing the sludge. And the two images on the left are showing pictures of the site establishment in the project. Next slide, please. So this on the right, the graph on the right just shows you the current progress today. So the green line represents current production, the blue is the target. So as you can see, we're tracking pretty well. The current rate of progress, we're expecting to move 7,000 tonnes, dry tonnes before the consent expires in March of next year. Further increased production, the contractors are looking to move to 24-hour operation. And we're testing sludge samples for asbestos, and so far those are all below work safe standards. Another project we've got down at Timanga is...
Sorry, Lara.
Thanks, Jim. Sorry to interrupt. I thought I might as well raise it now while we're on the desludging topic. Prior to your time, but certainly back at the June 2022 meeting and then the August 2022 meeting, which was the last time we met, there had been raised by staff always an issue around options for sludge disposal on the basis that there wasn't an expectation that you would complete the job before the expiry of the consent next year. There was no report back in August, and the minutes suggest that there might have been. There's been no report here, but I'm taking from that that's because you're not needing to look for alternative options anymore given the current rate of progress.
So my understanding is that the current rate of progress will enable us to take out, or will enable the disposal of around 6,000 to 7,000 dry tonnes, which was the first sort of stage of the project. There may well still be a requirement that there may well still be more sludge in the pond than that. And we still the option that's on the table is for any further desludging material to have to go off-site. If we need to continue past that March. The current rate of progress is where we thought it would be. We're trying to get ahead of that in case we come up against any, I guess, issues around. Jim's already discussed around the seepage results, and at the moment everything's there is looking okay in terms of our ability to keep desludging and not breaching consent there. But as the contractor moves around the pond, that may change, and there may be some issues that we have to stop what we're doing while we assess that and how we work around those issues. So all we're trying to do at the moment is get ahead of schedule so that we can, if we do come up with any issues, we sort of have some time up our sleeve, I guess.
Also provides when you plant breakdown.
Yeah. So, for example, at the moment, my understanding is the contractor's only got 2 or 3 of their centrifuges working, or they maintain them. So there's all those sorts of things that can happen as well.
Thanks for that. So in terms of disposal options post March 2024, there is still the potential for sludge to need to be removed, and the option for that has now been isolated, and you know what it is. And is there? This was a topic that we discussed quite regularly and frequently, and it seems to have fallen off as something we're getting a report back on. So I'm interested to know if beyond March 2024 there's a need to dispose of sludge from the pond, what's what's the plan for that?
So I think we have. You're right. We have talked about it before. So the potential is that if we still have sludge that needs to be removed, we won't be able to use the Tamunga landfill that we're currently disposing on. It will have to go off-site, and at the moment the only option that we have on the table is for somewhere like Hampton Downs that would accept that material. So that's been the case through the planning of the project. The staff involved have looked at options closer to home and haven't been able to find anywhere. We've looked at whether current biosolids removal and disposal options would be able to accept the material, and that wasn't able to happen. So at the moment, just like with our biosolids, if we can't get our biosolids to be accepted at, for example, the vermicomposting site that we're currently using, then that also has to go to Hampton Downs. So the option, I guess, is the same as what we would be doing if we weren't utilising our biosolids in that way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Jim, you. Oh, Des.
Just on the desludging and the going off of the biosolids and the obvious significance and costs for operations to transport that is it's been as part of the regular update and the strategy to look at. You talked about looking at other options here. Is there in any study looked at re-injection into land at close proximity to the city?
So I'm not sure I understand. Re-injecting of the sludge into some area.
Yeah.
You mean after the March 24? Yeah.
One of the pieces of work that we need to do is a biosolids strategy. We still don't have a long-term strategy for biosolids. So at the moment, it's we're dewatering and it's going to vermicomposting. Now that is open to vagaries within the market, whether the market can take all of that composted product and use it beneficially for kiwifruit or wherever it goes. A lot of it goes to South Island apparently. It goes all over the place, and they market this stuff quite widely. But if that market should shrink for any reason, then our backup is landfill. And like, as you point out, it's very expensive trucking all the way over there, and it's not good for our carbon measurements either. So one piece, once we get this PVC out of the way, we're going to be working on a biosolids strategy. So I hope that's okay with you. That's a long-term intent.
Okay.
I was just going to say, we can bring a report to the review committee about what the current, I guess, the previous biosolids strategy that we had, which mainly focused on the issues we had with Pond 1 and removing the need to put sludge in that pond. So that's really the initial biosolids strategy that I think was probably 2016, focused really on that stage 1. And stage 2 is more around, is what Wally has just been talking about, the more long-term options. So at the moment we've got, I guess, a sort of temporary option that with the vermicomposting that's enabling us to divert those biosolids from the landfill, and we're working hard to try and divert as much of the biosolids as we can to that, and there'll be other reports that will come around that. But we're happy to provide some further information around that. It's just that with the work that we've been doing with the PVC, it's
Our main concern is we've got all our eggs in one basket. Yes, landfill is a backup. Landfill is always the backup, but we've got our eggs in one basket, so we're a little bit exposed potentially if market conditions change. So but that's another discussion for the committee for the future.
Yeah, next slide, please. So the next upgrade is the bioreactor 2. So picture on the right shows the current state of play with the drill rigs. So yeah, we're currently constructing internal power grids. Some of them have been advanced. We've still got quite a way to go. So current rate of progress, we should have had the ground improvement works completed by December this year. The above ground works are scheduled to commence January 23 this year. The landward section. So the landward section of the outfall project is now complete. So some pictures on the right are showing various stages of the project. So currently we've got all 1,700 metres of the 1,200mm diameter pipe installed. With a section of 600mm being lined as well. Next, please. In regards to the outfall section, so we've currently done 400 metres of cleaning and removed debris. So that's the ROV which we've currently been using. So the pictures just show it's in operation at the moment. The other project is the clarifier number 3. So the piling trials have completed at the end of September last year. Currently the contract is, the award date is expected to be about May 23. And yeah, currently the steel cases are being procured and physical works will commence in June this month. Finally, moving on to the Environmental Mitigation Enhancement Fund. So as of December 2022, we expressions of interest were sought. So we advertised through the standard local channels. In the first quarter of 2023, we've interviewed several candidates, which were subsequently shortlisted. So we're currently waiting on the next steps, which is for the committee to appoint the preferred candidates, and once that's done, we can open the panel up for funding. And that's about it. That concludes the activities report.
Might be probably a question for Radley. In terms of, I thought we'd made appointments in terms of enhanced.
I believe we did in the, I want to say the August meeting, but with the changes to the committee, that might need a review.
Okay.
So currently the appointments were Fiti and Tarangi.
Okay. Is that something we can do now, or do we need to, if there was a recommendation in terms of motion? Like Mara.
Just a point of clarification first. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not the committee that will approve the new members of the panel based on jury shortlisting. It's the panel members that have been appointed by this committee that will. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, there'll be a need, I think, to update the panel position that Te Rangi Mārie held. And I'm happy to volunteer. Otherwise, I'm volunteering Spencer. And I appreciate that the next step, once that's confirmed, the next step in the process will be for, if it is myself and Fiti, to meet with council staff to go through the shortlist candidates that you've arrived at, and then look to make those appointments, and then the expression of interest for the actual fund can be made. Is
that's correct.
So you're volunteered for that role. Awesome. That's noted.
Nominated we had
Well, you're already a panel member. It's just really to replace the now that she's no longer on this committee. But that's up for discussion. It's got to be one of us.
I don't see a lot of other hands. So do we need to formalise that appointment?
Yeah, I guess the changes to the committee hadn't happened when the report was written, but yes, we do just need to, we can do that now.
So we're replacing rather than appointing?
Te rangi nui would look to replace Rangi Māori on the funding component of the committee. Before that, we'd like to mihi atu, if we can, thank Rangi Māori for that key area while we endeavour to address a lot of tangata whenua issues for ngā pāpaka, especially ngā Pōtiki, and to have Awaho come in outside of the area and come in with your expertise has been really valuable. This on that same whakaaro, I'd like to recommend or nominate Lara. So, thank you. It's been a good example for Tauranga Moana's tangata whenua. Kia ora.
Just waiting for that. Okay.
So while that's happening, Wawaho is from outside of the area, you may marry in or a distant connection to the area. And sometimes there's tangata whenua that's really important. We cannot fulfill this at that point in time. Those particular skills and attributes. I'm the rangi nui, and we do have up back 2 years rangi nui into the rangatawa, and especially Tauranga City. That it's important to acknowledge that aspect within tangata whenua. I just think it would be good to capture that. It does say tangata whenua in the committee, really, yeah. And protocols usually go that tangata whenua have the first and last say, so I just would have like to have a mention from a tangata whenua perspective. Doing my ngāti here. So yeah, that's the reason why. And its significance to collective decision making for the kaupapa, for the people. Thank you. Rangi Māori. Right.
Here we are. Where's the scroll up? We've received the report, noting the change in the. Thanks for your offer there. Moved by Des, seconded by Stephen. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. Okay. Did you have?
I did. So in receiving, and I don't want to miss the opportunity. So in receiving the wastewater activities report, I just wanted to make sure that my query around circling back on the desludging options is something that is reported back to the committee. I'd like to see that. And I mean, part of that is what happens after it's desludged and the decommissioning. And it would be helpful to, when we're talking about desludging, that we're also talking about the decommissioning of that pond as well. Yeah. So just like that noted so that it's not lost in the minutes, because these meetings, our next meeting might be very soon, but our regular meetings are relatively infrequent, and I don't want to lose the thread of the discussion that we've been having with staff around essentially the decommissioning, which step one is desludging.
So, sorry, I just for clarification, so you would like us to, so at the moment we're including the desludging, I guess, as a start a conversation around Pond 1. You'd like us to have a specific report on decommissioning as well, or?
I see it as, you know, part of the same topic or matter.
Just to me, it's part of the process, like you're saying, talking about desludging, and that's because we're wanting to decommission that pond from there. That's how I have always thought of it, the desludging first. But yeah, I suppose there'll be more discussion on the decommissioning, but I totally agree with Lara.
Yeah, I think there will be. There will be, because there'll be implications, I suspect, in terms of the decommissioning. So it's understanding what all that package looks like for an informed discussion on that.
Yeah, so the future use of that pond is built into the PBC.
Yeah.
Okay. Another volunteer.
Thanks, Wally.
Okay.
For a reminder.
Could a builder, sorry, Wally, that was your guy's angle. Our angle is to actually decommission it, not to put it into the program business case and assign it to something else. It was about decommissioning it, handing it back to Mount Portuguese.
The point I was making was that there are implications. It's just not an action, it is a standalone action. So it's understanding what all of that package and implications, etc., are around, well, it's been desludged, but what decommissioning means and the implications of that.
Sure, yeah, we'll come back on that.
On that note, there are no other items.
I think there's one item, Mr. Chair. A vote of thanks to Te Ranga Maria for all the work she's done on the program business case. I think is worth. But it's still continuing.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you'd kind of fall off the edge of the earth. Sorry about that.
No, it's only from this committee.
That is good news. I'm very delighted with that answer.
Acknowledge the sentiment.
Thanks anyway.
Okay, there's no further items, so Des, closing karakia.
Kia ora mai tātou I whai tēnā. Uri ruake nei ngā take nunu ki tono te hapuri ki tono ki whenua. Reira kāre I toro hoki te ahi ahi nei. Te tūmanako kia hoki pai kāinga a popo nei kamahia no tātou. Reira kia tau kia tātou katoa te whai ki tātou ariki a Eukaroti. Te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Aia nei, ake, ānga.
Thank you. And thank